And thank you for joining. We will get started with today's session in just a few moments. We want to make sure that everyone is able to log into today's session, and then we will jump in to all of the great content for today. All right, well, good morning and welcome to this Thursday, August 5th session of the Small Business Bootcamp. My name is Faith Ritchie and I'm the Small Business Programs Manager at the Arizona Commerce Authority, filling in for your usual host, Robert Theobald. As always, at the start of our session, we first want to give acknowledgement and thanks to our many community partners who without them, we would not be able to provide the quality sessions and resources that we've been so fortunate to provide. If you are new to the Small Business Bootcamp, the bootcamp was designed to help prepare small businesses of less than 20 employees return from the COVID crisis stronger than ever. It is a statewide initiative supported by our amazing network of community partners, as well as a resource collective and content library. For additional tools and guidance regarding returning stronger, essentials for running your business, as well as marketing strategies, we encourage you to visit the Arizona Commerce Authority's Resource Collective. These are all additional resources and guides provided again by our community partners for your review. Our content library is comprised of well over 140 recorded bootcamp sessions. So whether you are looking to get more information on a specific topic or you are wanting to revisit a topic that you got so much information from, you can review those resources and recordings on our Arizona Commerce Authority's Small Business Bootcamp website. To access all of those previously recorded sessions, once you get access to the website, you can scroll down to our archive section where all of those recordings are managed per week. For additional and ongoing COVID-19 information and resources, we would like to remind you to visit the Arizona's website, arizonatogether.org, as well as the Arizona Commerce Authority's azcommerce.com/COVID-19 website. As always, the Arizona Commerce Authority has a variety of programs to assist small businesses growing and operating, as well as starting in Arizona. So whether you are seeking small business service information, workforce, or manufacturing, the Arizona Commerce Authority has programs and resources available for you. Additional information for these programs can be found on the Arizona Commerce Authority's website. One of these fantastic resources is our small business checklist. This checklist program is an interactive online resource guide to assist with those commonly requested licensing information for local, state, and federal levels. Again, whether you are starting, operating, or growing, there is information of value for you on our website. Now moving on to some small business updates. The PPP loan forgiveness portal is now open, and we are excited to announce an upcoming special session to discuss these topics. And we'll share more information about that special session in just a moment. Some additional resources to take advantage of or learn more about are the Employee Retention Credit and the EIDL Targeted Advance. The information is shared within the chat for additional information. Last but certainly not least, the Arizona Innovation Challenge applications are open For more information about this program, as well as the application process, you can use the link provided for that additional information. Now, as discussed, here is a look of all of our upcoming, not all, but our upcoming sessions for the Small Business Bootcamp. As you can see, we are focusing on that employee experience, as well as mentioned, our special session happening Wednesday, August 11th at 2 p.m. As a reminder, this session, as our other sessions, will be recorded and shared on our website, but you can register for all of our upcoming sessions on the Arizona Commerce Authority's website. Now to finally get to why we are all here today, joining us to discuss small business HR compliance, we are happy to welcome Sonia Talley. Sonia is a certified human resource professional with over 30 years of experience. She is the principal owner of Core HR Solutions, LLC, and serves on the Arizona Society for Human Resources Management State Council, as well as others. So she is a busy lady, and we are so happy to have her join us today to share resources with our small business community. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to you, Sonia.
Okay, good morning. As I share my screen, good. Happy Thursday in this muggy Arizona. Thanks for having me. I am presenting today not as a lawyer, so please keep in mind I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, that's my disclaimer. I'm providing you an overview of some of the most common compliance issues that I find when I consult with my small business owners. And I am not directing you to change your business practices, but you might want to change one or two if that is appropriate. I always give the example of running the red light. You know we cannot run a red light. There could be a ticket waiting for us if we run a red light, but only if we get caught. So I leave it up to my clients how much risk they want to have in running that red light, or same as exceeding the speed limit, which is not as bad as running a red light. So with this metaphor, today we will talk about independent contractor versus employees that you might use, exempt versus non-exempt employees, the Fair Wages and Healthy Families Act, which is your minimum wage and your paid sick leave. Are you up to date on your federal and state posters? And then are your job ads, your applications, interview questions foolproof, so you do not have harassment claims? I saved the questions for last because I have a lot of information for you. And in case we do not have time for questions, we'll compile the questions and send out answers to those questions after the fact. Okay, so let's get started with, independent contractors versus employee. I don't know if you're utilizing independent contractors. However, an agreement between you and another party to utilize an independent contractor status is not defined as being legitimate to utilize. An independent contractor is clearly defined by law. So are you using regular employees in your employment? Do you have temporary employees? Do you use staffing agency, independent contractors, or any combination of all of the above? Some of this work situations are very appropriate for independent contractors. Others are not. So those are the questions that you have to answer. Is the situation that I'm utilizing my independent contractor for appropriate and lawful? Or do I hire independent contractors because I don't want to deal with the payroll? I don't want to pay the taxes and do the workers' comp, unemployment insurance, and withholding, and don't answer that out loud, and you would know the answers to the questions. Definitely answering yes to number 2 will get you in trouble if there is an audit and if you're caught. Okay. The level of control directs whether or not you can hire somebody as an independent contractor. So your W-9 employees, do you direct their workday? Do you supervise them? Do they have the same skills as maybe employees if you have both independent contractors and employees on your payroll? Do your employees perform the same job duties as an independent contractor that you have? Are your projects ongoing, or are you just using an independent contractor for a specific project or for a short period of time? And do you pay hourly or project-wise? Those are all contributing factors to determine whether an individual can be an independent contractor or should be an employee. Now, I am also a small business owner. I'm a solopreneur, and I often fill in for an HR director or HR generalist during an absence or while somebody leaves and before a company can hire somebody else. But often I don't do that on a full-time basis, and I get paid a project fee rather than paid hourly. I also, moving on to the next slide, I set my own hours. I might have a core hours if I'm there for 4 hours in that day, but I can direct my own work. I am not prescribed how I do HR. I use the client systems, but how I structure my day and how I perform the work is up to me. And it's in the work. I'm independent. I'm an independent contractor, not subject to the rules and policies to your company. If you hire a temporary agent through a temporary agency, that employee will follow your rules. If you have a temporary worker on your payroll, that employee will follow your rules. Like, you could have an independent contractor without a question that performs work that is not part of your business. If you do not run a janitorial business, for example, and you hire a service to clean your offices, they're not on your payroll because they're not part of your regular business line. Or a bookkeeper or accountant could possibly be an independent contractor. Also, somebody who you call in who has special skills or special tools to perform a short-term project or ongoing intermittent work. Usually we have then more than one client, so you would just be one of our clients that would qualify as an independent contractor. And Arizona has been a little bit more lenient. However, the current administration, the Biden administration, is looking at independent contractor classification more closely. Of course, if you hire independent contractors, you don't have all the payroll taxes and unemployment and workers' comp. And then the government doesn't collect the tax piece from the employer. There is a great test, it's called the ABC test, that California has, and I think Michigan has one as well. Again, Arizona is not quite as strict in the interpretation of an independent contractor. However, if you look at the the California ABC test, and you can answer yes to all 3 of these questions, there is no question as to whether your employee, your worker, can be an independent contractor. So the A has to do with control and supervision that you would have. So the less control and supervision you have, the more likely an independent contractor status is. Then B addresses the performance of the work. Like I mentioned, maybe accounting or janitorial services could fall into this. However, even if you, on a very temporary basis for a specialty occupation, would contract with an independent contractor here in Arizona, that would be okay. And the third question, the C of the ABC, is really, does the independent contractor have other clients? Do they have their own liability insurance? Is it a trade that is needed maybe short term and not on an ongoing basis? Okay. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the Healthy Families Act on the sick leave, I believe. Okay. So consequences can be severe if you misclassify an employee as independent contractor. The government can go back and collect taxes, failure for overtime. Of course, you do not keep employment records or time records for independent contractors. So one of the fines is for failure to keep accurate records. If you misclassify, then you will be catching up on tax liabilities, workers' comp, unemployment, and have associated penalties and interest. So it's well worth your while to take a look at your classification if you do have independent contractors in your employment. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So moving on to exempt and non-exempt. So now you found out that some of your independent contractor really should be employees. Do you hire them on as hourly employees? Do you hire them on as an exempt employees? The DOL has very specific guidelines in several categories as to who can be exempt and who should be an hourly employees. Of course, hourly employees qualify for overtime, and for all hours worked over 40 hours in a given work week. And exempt employees typically do not punch a time clock because we're paying an exempt employee for the producing the work and not for the hours that they use to conduct the work. Okay. The most, here it is. What was I? Sorry about that. Exempt employees must meet, in general, there are some exceptions, but in general must meet 2 requirements in order to claim an exemption. The first requirement is a salary threshold. So in 2020, so not too long ago, we all felt the pain if we had exempt employees on our payroll of increasing the $684 a week amount from $455 a week. That was a significant increase. And I think the original discussion was over $900. And so we were happy to get a $684 a week increase, and maybe not happy, but it was a lot lesser blow than going from $455 to $900 and some dollars. A lot of my small business clients struggled with that huge increase, and we moved a lot of employees from an exempt status to an hourly status. Okay. The one other thing that the DOL allowed was to include non-discretionary bonuses in that annual salary. However, only 10% of non-discretionary bonuses or commissions. That means anything that the employee could not count on receiving could be counted into the annual threshold requirement, but 10% really is $3,556. So it didn't make a big dent, but it did help somewhat. Sign-on bonuses are not included in that dollar threshold requirement. Neither are any bonuses that are preempted, so we know that is expected. So that was one requirement. And oh, I need to add that right now the DOL opened a review because the DOL still believes that this salary threshold is too low. And it might be because an hourly rate an hourly rate at $684 a week translates into $17.10. With our increasing minimum wage, it might be too low going forward. So, but it is under review. I have not heard any rumblings as to what the DOL is thinking a fair and equitable threshold for our exempt employees could be. So the second requirement for exempt employees is really based on the specific job descriptions that you have. So job description is not in my presentation today, but that is another pitfall. The lack of job description, I often see, I don't see many small businesses have job descriptions, but if you have exempt employees, it is important to have job description for discipline purposes, etc. There's a lot of great reasons to really have job descriptions for your positions. So the duty tests fall into several categories. These are the most used categories. There's a few others on the Department of Labor's website, but Under executive exemption, aside from meeting the dollar threshold, the primary duty must be managing the enterprise, so the company, or a department or subdivision. The employee also usually directs the work of 2 or more full-time employees, or the equivalent to the full-time. So those are the major considerations for an executive exemption. The administrative exemption, aside from the dollar threshold, the primary duty must be that exemption cannot perform any manual work. So landscaping, manufacturing, shop work, and that position must be engaged in the general management of the business, to include exercising discretion and independent judgment with the respect to matters of significance. And there's not a good explanation as to what all these words mean. What is discretion? What is independent judgment? What are matters of significance? The guidance that I give is, can that position influence whether the company has a good year financially, a bad year financially? Can they influence fees and fines? Do they influence the operation of the business? So if you have a staff accountant or bookkeeper, or in the field a superintendent who can make independent hiring decisions, or has influence in performance reviews or merit increases, things like that. Okay. A professional exemption implies that this position usually has very specialized training or requires a degree, technological knowledge. Your corporate trainer or training position could be a professional exemption, or if you have engineers on staff, that would definitely. So anything, if you look at science or learning, if you think professional as science or learning, but not teachers, could qualify for professional exemptions. Outside sales is one of the categories that does not have, where is my sheet? Outside sales. Does not have a dollar requirement at all. So the outside sale explanation is pretty much sales away from the office. Any sales done on a computer or on a phone in the office do not qualify for this exemption. Also, if you own a car dealership, the TOL has very, very specific instructions for your mechanics, your salesperson, and there was one other exemption that could be classified exempt. Computer employees is another more frequently used category. That does not include data entry. It is your programmers, your analysts. So more than just running HR reports, I really have to analyze and influence the business, or have a proprietary application that I hired somebody to program, would all be exempt. employees. Okay. Okay. Moving on to our Fair Wages and Healthy Families Act, which is our Prop 206. And Prop 206 passed with a margin of 60%. So it was overwhelmingly welcomed. I'm sure not by all of us business owners. This proposition has been in effect since January 1st of 2017. However, I still see a lot of questions on the Arizona minimum wage and also the sick leave. And it is understandable that we have paid sick leave questions because the Industrial Commission, as we ask questions as to how to administer this section on the paid sick leave, has refined and defined our record keeping and rollover and everything a lot more, to where today it is a lot more manageable than it was back then in 2017. So we have a federal minimum wage, and we also have our Arizona minimum wage. Our Arizona minimum wage far outweighs the federal minimum wage. And I'm sure we all heard that the federal minimum wage might go to $15 at some point. But Arizona didn't wait for the federal minimum wage to catch up. Flagstaff is already at $15 an hour. And I recently read that Tucson is looking at moving to $15 an hour. So if you do business in Flagstaff and your employees do not earn $15 an hour when they work in Flagstaff, their minimum wage increases to the Flagstaff minimum wage. When the prop passed, so when the act passed, the provision was to increase the minimum wage by 50 cents each year. Thankfully, that did not quite hold. So today we are increasing every year still, but it's based on a cost of living index. And the Industrial Commission will post what the minimum wage will be for 2022. There are some exemptions to our minimum wage. If you own a restaurant, you may pay your tipped workers $9.60 an hour. However, that hourly rate must come to at least $12.15 an hour when you include the tips. I have a number of restaurant clients, and I think we all have gone to the minimum wage and with a different kind of a tip program attached. Also, Arizona high school and college students may be paid at $10.33 an hour, providing they work part-time and no more than 20 hours a week, as well as we have a Arizona under 20 law that allows training hours to be paid at $4.25 an hour for individuals who are 19 and younger, but only for training hours as a new hire that are conducted in the first 90 days from hire. Now, the question I have for you, if you try to hire a college student or somebody under 20, they're probably not going to agree to work for less than minimum wage. And you might not find anybody for these pay scales, but they are there and available to make use of. Okay. Moving on to paid sick leave. So it's not enough to grant the sick leave prescribed, but we also have very strict record keeping rules. We must provide posters. So your posting should be in English and Spanish. If you conduct interviews in your office, even if your workforce is all English speaking, your applicant may not be. So I would recommend at least this posters. There's a few other posters that should be posted in English and Spanish, but at least this one posted in both English and Spanish. The payroll records must show, the records you must keep must show the earned paid sick time that you have paid, and those records must be maintained for a minimum of 4 years. The pay stub or paycheck, or you may utilize a different document that you give your employees to account for your paid sick leave, must show the sick time earned, the sick time taken, and the sick time available at that pay period to that employee. Okay. You must accrue day 1 of employment, 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked. You may also, instead of accruing sick time, grant, or what we call front load, the entire required sick time day 1 of employment. The good news is that you can cap the sick time according to the numbers of employees that you have. If you have less than 15, so 14 or under, you can cap the accrual or front load of sick time to 24 hours in a year, and you get to decide, is it January to December in a calendar year, or is it a benefit year or anniversary year, so from date of hire to the next anniversary, whatever works best with your business practices. If you have 15 or more employees, then you are obligated to accrue or front load 40 hours of sick time each year. If you have those exempt employees, sick time is computed based on having a 40-hour employee. And even part-time, temporary, or seasonal employees, anybody who is paid under a W-4, so on your payroll, is included in the sick time. You may, however, have in your policy that an employee, a new hire, may not take sick time for up to the first 90 days. A lot of time we have conditional periods of employment or initial periods of employment that are of a 90-day duration or 60-day duration, sometimes 30 days, that you can utilize and say, you will accrue sick time, or I front loaded, this will be available on your day 91 or 61, depending on your policy. That policy must be in writing. It needs to be given to the employee. The policy will state the accrual or the front load. The policy will state when they may utilize, and also if sick time is paid out or not. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but if sick time is paid out or not, under what circumstances, there is no requirement to pay out any sick time under the law, but some employers have an annual payout as an incentive. I'd rather pay the sick time than have unscheduled absences. So it's a business consideration. But again, it should be in your written policy as to how you handle the sick time. Okay. The law is very generous as to when these employees, your employees, can utilize the sick time, because you cannot ask why they're sick or who they're taking care of. And they may have a sick day to take care of a sick child or a family member. And here is where the generosity comes into place. A family member is defined very broadly as any individual related by blood or affinity whose close association with the employee is the equivalent of a family relationship. Well, I have best friends that I consider family, so I choose that affinity label. And if I take my best friend to her eye surgery and take care of her, I now can, with paid sick leave, providing I have available times. Hopefully that eye surgery is scheduled and it's a scheduled sick time of an absent sick time. But it could be for any reason. Also mental health days, which really were very important, especially last year and now continuing with our COVID environment. It is available, and a mental health day, in my opinion, is a really great use of any sick time. Okay, so here it is. I already mentioned there is no provision to have to pay out sick time, but you have to communicate that it is not going to be paid out to your employees. You may limit the sick time to 24, 40 hours. And the law says unused sick time rolls into the following year, which is great. If you accrue and I don't use any of my 24 hours, I now in January, if I have an annual sick time policy, but for calendar year, if I get sick January 25th, I have hours available. But you can limit the use for that year to that 24 or 40 hours. So you don't need to add on sick hours. I can only ever I can limit the use to what the law allows, to that 24 or 40 hours. Okay. If I'm a seasonal or temporary worker and I'm with you for 2 months, then my employment is terminated, then I might be rehired 3 months down the road because there's another project. Sick time has to be reinstated if I'm rehired within 9 months from termination. And I would be considered not a new employee. I could be utilizing that sick time that's available to me at that time. If an employee calls off sick, you cannot count that towards any disciplinary actions or ask for a specific illness. You can also not ask for documentation unless that employee is out for 3 or more consecutive days. And even the documentation should probably only read was unable to work the last 3 days, is released to full duty or something like that. We, for the ADA purposes and discriminatory purposes, do not ask about specific illnesses, which is another whole topic for a webinar. Okay. If, and this was not clear in 2017, however, if you have a separate vacation policy that already provides time off at a minimum of 24, if 14 or less employees, or the 40 hours for 15 or more employees, you don't need another separate sick time policy if you make these vacation or PTO hours also available to be used for sick time. So it could be just one policy. But of course, if you have a sick time policy, the law does not mandate that you provide vacation to employees. So in 2017-18, I saw a lot of these policies change, and I'm still changing some policy to include PTO. The only negative is if your vacation or PTO policy has that sick time component is, and then you have more than 40 hours, let's say you have an 80-hour vacation policy, then potentially all of these 80 hours could be utilized for sick time and could become protected time for the employee, meaning you cannot use those absences for disciplinary reasons. Okay. I know we are running tight on time, but let me give you some updates on posters. So posting is required even if you have one employee. And it's become really hard because we have remote workers. How do I post for my remote workers? So there's some solutions for you. Also outdated posters. You can find all of these posters online free of charge, but I can promise you, you'll spend more money converted in productive work time finding all of these. If you have a payroll company or a PEO, a lot of times those companies provide posters for you. There's many posting companies that have the all-in-one posters for a federal and for Arizona. And for a whole year that you subscribe, they will provide updates for you so you're never outdated. And for your remote workers, there is a electronic version. So if you have an intranet, you can post it internally with a link, as long as you let the employees know this is where I can find the posters. If you're on a construction site, a lot of times we do print the posters out and have a binder with your safety manual. Or you can choose for new hires or when posters update, typically every year, because you have minimum wage on those posters typically. The email packet goes to employees as well. And it's as low as $25 a year for each state that you're in. So it's a small, I think a small fee to pay to be in compliance with the federal postings. Okay, because there are fees and fines attached, and each posting potentially could have its own fees or fine. And there are some posters that have a fine per employee that's in your employment. So even one fine is not worth saving that little money. Okay. Then this is a question I ask my clients. Would your employment really should be recruiting practices pass the discrimination test? And there's 3 prongs to your recruiting. It starts with your job ads, your applications that you might use, or then your, sorry, I've been talking too long. Your job and then your interview questions, of course. I have a funny story. 30 years ago, when I came to Arizona, I was working on a construction site. My boss asked me to hire an administrative assistant for our client who worked side by side with us. And which I did. I interviewed, I found a great candidate. I hired her, I presented the paperwork to my boss, and he goes, well, is she married and does she have children? And I'm going, well, you can't ask those questions. And he insisted that he needed to know because people with children might miss too much work. And so I reminded him that I have 7 and I don't miss work, and that is not true and it is unlawful, and the candidate worked out fine. And hopefully 30 years later, we are more cognizant of the law to know not to ask age-related questions or gender-related questions. Starting in our job ads, if we say looking for a young, energetic, well, that's a discriminatory ad. We can't use those words. So really take a look at your job ads to make sure they're as gender neutral as possible. And do not discriminate against our protected classes, because the EEOC will enforce the discrimination laws. And also take a look at where you recruit. If you, I would really recommend, if at all possible, to use several venues. Do employee recommendations, do online job ads, but also post jobs with, I think, the DES or certain other agencies with, and those are free with government agencies that draw from a broad range of applicants, not just one, which could be discriminatory as well. Okay. Your applications. I just recently reviewed a job application that did ask for a social security number. Why you would want to release that when you're not hired, I don't know. But it was on that application, and driver's license number. Don't recall if it specifically asked for the date of birth, but it did ask specifically the name of the high school and the year graduated, the name of the college, the year graduated. Well, I don't need to be a math major to figure out how old my applicant is if I know if I, the year graduated from high school. It may fluctuate a year or two, but generally. So there could be unintended hidden discrimination hiding even in your job application. So have that reviewed or take a look at it. And also, just as an aside, the applications that you receive or resumes, if that's what you use, you must keep those for 3 years. So record keeping requirements for your files or recruiting is another topic for another webinar. But so I would suggest that you take a look at that. And then in your interviews, same, I already talked a bit about it, same principles apply. Do not ask any questions that are could potentially be discriminatory. I gave you some questions that will tell you quite a bit about your applicant. And any skills related, tell me about some job duties of your previous employment that you might use here in this job. What do you know about us? Things like that. Your greatest achievement so far at work, or if it's a team environment, devise some team questions. And then I gave you some questions to never ask. A lot of times in interviews, we like to chit chat. And I know I have a bit of an accent, and usually people don't know where that's from, but that could be a topic of, chit-chatting. Oh, I've noticed you have an accent. Were you born in this country? It has nothing to do with a job. If it has nothing to do with a job, just don't ask it. You can ask all you want after you make a job offer. But so curiosity, I immigrated 30 years from Germany. And I do get that I did when I worked in corporate interviews, or, hey, how many kids do you have, right? Like my boss wanted to know, what's your partner's name? Or another question that was really odd at times is, what's your 5-year plan? Well, you really want to know, is the employee going to stay here for 5 years or not? So a lot of times when you ask broad questions like that, well, I want to go back to college, has really nothing to do with a job. So overall, if it's not job related, just don't ask it. And you'll save yourself a lot of heartache. Well, I hope, I see 3 minutes on my clock. I hope that I was able to give you some pointers and some checklists that you can go to your office, and I hope you won't have sleepless nights. But I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best and success. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sonia. I know you gave so much great information today. Again, as a reminder, Sonia's presentation and recording will be made available on our Arizona Commerce Authority Small Business Bootcamp website. As Sonia mentioned at the start of this presentation, we know we asked her to share so much information in a condensed amount of time, and we do have questions in the Q&A box. For sake of time, we won't address those questions because they are a little lengthy, I would assume, in response, but don't worry, we will share those questions with Sonia after today's presentation to give you an answer to your question. So thank you so much, Sonia, for sharing that information to our group prior and for providing that service, because what we really want to do is to get this information out to our small businesses. So again, thank you, Sonia, so much for this information. We hope to see you here again next week, everyone. Again, we will be hosting a special session on Wednesday at 2 p.m. regarding PPP forgiveness. So we hope to see you back next week, but have a great rest of your week and weekend. And again, Sonia, thank you so much for your time and energy this morning. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Bye-bye.